All right.
Terrie's next. She's coming.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. If you join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is anyone recording for the public? Thank you. Mrs. Zabinski, if you can't hear well at any time, don't hesitate to give us a signal, okay?
Thank you.
Sorry. Roll call, please, Mr. Boyer.
Mrs. Harenza.
Here.
Mr. Hershey.
Here.
Mrs. Kuhn.
Here.
Mrs. Phillips. Ms. Rodriguez.
Here.
Mr. Schippers.
Here.
Mrs. Taylor. Mrs. Torres.
Here.
Mrs. Zabinski.
Here.
We have 7 minutes.
Thank you. Upcoming meetings, we have a Board of School Directors meeting here in this room on February 26th at 6 o'clock. We have a Finance and Facilities workshop here on February 28th at 5:30. Is there any public comment at this time? Then seeing none, we'll move to routine approvals. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following minutes. January 8, 2024, Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. We'll move on to board liaisons. Mrs. Kuhn, curriculum.
Dr. Woodard and I met on February 2nd to discuss more about the math, increasing the math instructional minutes for 7th and 8th grade. And Dr. Woodard's going to be sharing the progress of those discussions tonight. But just a few things that we talked about that I just kind of emphasize. For all the board members, addressing the number of instructional minutes for math is a part of our strategic plan, comprehensive plan, and a key part of the math action plan. And the district has determined that improving proficiency among our students in math is necessary and has tasked the administration with implementing those strategies. So this is one of those strategies. And I thought it was interesting, we talked a little bit about, currently our 7th and 8th graders receive the lowest amount of minutes of math instruction as compared to other schools in our district, and correct me if I'm incorrect on that. And also, quite a bit different from what they receive in 6th grade. So when they're moving from 6th to 7th grade, the amount of instructional minutes in math really does drop off quite a bit. So I think the challenge, though, is that, our 7th and 8th graders share a schedule with 9th or 12th graders. So you're sharing staff and you're following the same schedule. So I think that presents some challenges. And I know Dr. Woodard and the team have worked really hard at looking at all angles of the schedule. Working with administration and teachers and all the classes that will be affected by that. So I don't think that there's any, perfect 100% answer, but I think, there's been a lot of things explored, and I think Dr. Wood will share that tonight. And, just kind of keeping an open mind about it and knowing that we may be, and it's noted, I think, in a couple weeks maybe, that we'll be looking at the schedule as a whole. So it's not something that's set in stone forever. So those are just some of the things I think from our conversation, just important to note. But we'll go into greater detail on all of that.
Great. Thank you for that report. Mrs. Phillips is not present for facilities. Finance, Mr. Schippers.
Yeah, so we had my first finance committee meeting and went over the budget at a high level, just looking at sort of some of the capital needs that are going to be coming up as a part of this year's budget. You probably have all seen the news, the governor's new budget proposal has come out. A lot of moving parts that's going to play out over the next several months, and we'll have to see what the implications are for the school system. As you mentioned, there is a next Finance Committee meeting on the 28th, and that's at 5:30. The auditor is going to be present at that meeting, so we're really hoping as many board members can be there as possible. It's going to be an important meeting for us. With that, I'll turn it back over.
Thank you. And policy, we'll catch up with Mrs. Taylor when she's available. So, Dr. Woodard, 7th and 8th grade math schedule.
All right, so we wanted to spend this evening just sharing a brief update regarding the math instructional minutes, our proposal to increase those minutes for 7th and 8th grades. So I have an agenda here. We're going to just kind of do a quick background and review of goals just to bring everybody on the same page. Take a look at the current math instructional minutes by level, so looking at K to 4, 5, 6, 7 to 12. And then I'm going to run through the decision-making process that we went through and the communications and the meetings that we've had with the teachers, the building and district administrators. Then I'm going to share with you the 3 different options that we came to and presented our final group with, and then the final recommendation that we have. So that's kind of a little bit of an agenda rundown for you. But to get started, as Mrs. Kuhn shared, this has really been kind of in the making for a couple of years. It's been in the making for a couple of years. We do complete our comprehensive plan, and the current comprehensive plan that we are in serves us from 2022 to 2025. So it's a 3-year plan, and it is submitted to the Pennsylvania Department of Education. In that plan, there was quite a bit of emphasis placed on improving our K to 7 math curricula, as well as looking at improving our student proficiency based on our state assessments. Certainly we use a lot of other assessments as well, but that is a guideline that we can utilize year to year and benchmark year to year. Just so you are aware, I'm going to update you tonight on the math instructional minutes proposal. But in 2 weeks, we're going to come back together and update you on the progress of our math action plan. So the comprehensive plan was submitted to the state. We're looking at, again, increasing our math proficiency up 15% by the conclusion of the 3-year window. Didn't mean we had to increase it by 15% in 1 year, but over from year to year to year. And we are on our way to meeting that goal. In addition to that comprehensive planning process that we all as districts need to go through, we've also entered into a strategic plan, which is a combined effort from the administration and the school board of directors. In that, we emphasized again the need to continue to grow our student achievement and our student growth in the area of mathematics. And so, as a result of both of those plans, we wanted something that is definitely a living, breathing document, and that's where we created the action plan for math. So we'll go into the different focus areas in the next meeting regarding that. But I just kind of wanted to share that with you. That really states and helps to support the need to make some changes, going forward. The next slide is a sample. I pulled out the one particular focus area of our math action plan that deals with looking at the options for the schedule, specifically at the junior, senior high school. And again, a point of context, over the past couple of years, we have already increased the math instructional time K to 6. So we've been kind of growing this, and quite frankly, the biggest bear to tackle is the 7 through 12 building. So that's where we are now. So the plan, within the action plan, the one goal would be to, by the end of this year, create the schedule for the following school year to be implemented to increase math minutes, again, starting at the 7th and 8th grade level. So that's just pulled from our action plan. Again, the action plan was developed to really address a lot of different areas: professional learning, schedule, just curricula in general, instructional resources. So we'll go into that much more in depth next time at the February 26th meeting. But this today is really focused on that time allocation and schedule. So why? Why do we really concentrate on trying to increase that 41 minutes of instructional time in math? And it's really because we do have one of the lowest amounts of instructional time in the state when you really look at how many minutes our students spend in 7th and 8th grade. Some middle schools, when you look at a middle school, whether it's a 6, 7, 8 building or 5 to 8 building, they typically, in some cases, have a double period of math every day. Just like we have a double period of English every day. We have a period of English and a period of writing. They do the same for math. Other districts haven't been able to figure that out either, and so they do maybe a single period of math every day, and then 3 days of their 6-day cycle, they do another period of math. So it's not quite as much as the English language arts, but it's more than just a period a day. So that's kind of typically what you see in a middle school. But again, we have that extra challenge of being a 7 to 12 building, which makes it a little bit harder to figure out. So we've been operating simply on a single period of math daily for grades 7 to 12. Here is a chart of and comparing our math instructional minutes at each level. So you have the K to 4 building at the Hills. We have anywhere between 75 and 90 minutes of math instruction a day. We did not have that just a couple of years ago. We were struggling to hit 60 every day. And we realized how low we were, comparatively speaking, with other districts. So with new resources, with additional professional learning, we now spend at least 75 minutes, and some teachers will say, it's closer to 90 every day. And I think that's exciting. When you look at over the course of 6 days, how many minutes students are involved in math instruction. And the nice part about that, specifically, in K to 6 is that we're doing a lot of small group rotational learning. And so students are really getting their needs met where they are. And I think that that's important. So it's not 75 minutes or 90 minutes of whole group math instruction. It's, some mini lessons, small group instruction, and dividing up, and students are applying, where they need to be and getting the lessons that they need individually or, small groups. So it's utilized very well. And then the move to the West Reading building is a 5-6 building, and we've gotten about 65 minutes on paper, instructionally. So, realistically, it might be with transition, like 60, 62 minutes, but it is 65 minutes, on paper there. And then, like Mrs. Kuhn said, you come up to the junior, senior high, and just because of the nature of the building and the schedule, period by period, we have the 41-minute period. So, it decreases, and that's something we think, again, we can't solve everything at one time, but if we could just kind of chip away at that and taking a look at that 7th and 8th grade, it would be a help. So just wanted to share those instructional minutes with you, just within our own district, how disparate we are. Okay. And just kind of a little bit of a review as well. Our proposed instructional minutes plan is going to be going from a period every day which is 6 periods per cycle because we have a 6-day cycle, to 8 periods per cycle for students who are not in an accelerated math. So in 6th grade right now, in 7th grade right now, that would be like accelerated pre-algebra, or in 8th grade, currently, it's Accelerated Algebra 1, but we are revamping that course sequence. So we're looking at the majority of students who will be on grade level getting that extra 82 minutes per cycle. Okay, so they would be going to math 8 periods a day, 8 periods a cycle. So in other words, 2 cycle days, they would go to math, let's just say period 3, and then period 11 that day, okay? There are a couple of options where if they have a 10th period math class, they would be adjacent, they'd actually get the double period, which picks up even a couple more minutes because they don't have to transition. But for the majority of the students who are non-accelerated, they will go to a period of math earlier in the day, and then 2 of those cycle days go back on period 11. So that extra 41 minutes twice a cycle really does equate to 82 minutes additional math instruction for every cycle. 6 days a cycle, there are 30 cycles in the school year, and so when you really come and do all the math, it's about 2 months extra of instruction in math over the course of the school year, which is considerable. And so I think that, again, it's a step in the very right direction. Not only, and again, I've said this before and I will go on record saying this again, more time doesn't automatically mean higher achievement. But how we use that time is very important. And so we're going to continue to work with teachers to be as effective as possible. So there's always that professional learning piece there. And also something that I think is really important, and I think it's on the next slide, Mr. Arns. This is not math tutor time. This is not just get your homework done time. This is actually like instructional time. It's just like going to the class again. I don't know how many of your students have, taken courses here at the high school, those of you who have had older children. If they have, for example, AP biology, they have 6 periods of AP biology, but they actually have 3 additional periods of lab. So they have 9 periods over the 6 days. There is not always a lab when lab is assigned, but it's not a bio tutor period, it's actually an instructional period then. So I'm trying to help students understand that's kind of how I'm likening it to. So in other words, it's just going to math again, and we're continuing where we left off. And that's the beauty of this is it's with the same teacher as well. So we don't have to worry about any discontinuity. So the flow certainly should be there for that purpose as well. I will be honest, again, it's not with it. We're able to do this without additional staffing, but we still have some challenges, and that's what we'll talk about, and those who are affected by that. But we haven't had to add additional staffing to make this happen, so I think that's a positive. Listen, I talked to the 7th grade teachers, and the teacher who teaches Accelerate said, I wish we could have this additional time for our Accelerated kids too. And I didn't argue. I said, I'd love it for everybody. We just can't physically do that with the staffing that we have right now. So the math department is very excited and appreciative of the time with the students, which I think is important as well. So I realize, again, we're focusing on those students who are not in the accelerated section, but it's not going to hurt anyone down the road if we are able to even continue to grow this. But for now, we are targeting those non-accelerated sections, which are the majority of sections. I think that's also important to note. So the decision-making process. Initially, obviously we've had this in the math action plan. It's been in the math action plan now, for over a year. And but the conversation is always happening during department chair meetings, and so I know the building level administrators talk to our department chairs about changing this schedule and the potential impact. And then obviously the department chair members from Health Phys Ed and from Music said, can we sit down and re-examine this a little bit? Can we take a look at this a little more closely? So we set up meetings with high school administration, myself, Mrs. Mangold was a part of it as well, with Mrs. Reardon, the HPE department chair. We met with her. We also met with Ms. Barra, same group, again, separately. So we took their ideas, their thoughts, their input, and their feedback from just thinking about how we're going to make this happen. So those meetings occurred. And then we took that information from them, and the building and district administrators got together, and we said, okay, let's take a look at the input. What is feasible to make a couple of options? We thought, let's put together 3 options, A, B, and C on the table, option 1, option 2, option 3, that we, could support, and let's see if we can gather those folks together again. So we brought in the HPE department chair as well as the music department chair. We all sat around and presented each option thoroughly and tried to answer any questions or clarify any confusion or anything like that existed around each of those options. So That was part of it. I introduced what everybody is laughing at me, but I have a protocol and I call it the fist to 5. All right, so fist is, I absolutely can't stand this idea. It will not work. We cannot do it. 5 is, I 100% agree this is the best thing since sliced bread. We've got to do this. The idea when you are building consensus is you're probably not going to get all 5s, right? Because everybody will be pleased with everything. But you can't leave a meeting with a plan that everybody's at a fist, because that's not going to work either. And so when I go fist to 5, we went through that process. I explained what it was. I said, you know, we're going to go through each option. We're going to talk about each option. Again, questions, clarifications. Then we're going to go back to each option, and we're going to fist to 5 everything. And with that, we were able to come up with an option that everybody was a 3 or a 4. But okay, that means we can leave here. We can support something. I know not everybody is 100% enthused, but they said, you know what, this is a plan that we can put into place. That was my goal, that we could at least move forward with that. This idea may not be permanent, and that's what I also tried to share with the group, that we have changing enrollment numbers when it comes to music and ensembles all the time. And so while we are trying to make a plan with numbers that we know now, they're going to change. And though we might have a good idea next year, we don't know what 2 years or 3 years down the road will bring. So between ensemble enrollment numbers, and quite frankly, they're growing a little bit, which is a positive thing. So, you know, we want to keep that in mind. And so maybe something will work next year or even the following that wouldn't work because our enrollment numbers in music have gone up so much. So that's a situation that we want to celebrate, but we have to figure that out down the road. We also have to realize that, again, potentially we could be looking at, you know, re-examining our schedule for the entire 7 to 12 building. If that's the case, that could then also play into not having to have this kind of a Band-Aid or a bridge, but actually creating a middle school schedule that is a little bit more middle school schedule like. You know, so who knows? We're not at that point to say that's going to happen either. So I try to impress upon everybody that we've got to be behind something that's going to work, at least for next year, you know, and minimally, potentially the following. But we will certainly agree to say, let's continue to assess how we're doing throughout this implementation. So we did get to that point in time. Now I want to share with everybody the options that were presented. Those of you at your tables, you have a copy of that, because I didn't know how well you'd be able to see it on there. So, so again, 3 options. Option 1 is on one side, and options 2 and 3 are on the back side. Option 1 is a little bit different between 7th grade and 8th grade. That's why it took a little longer to explain that. You're going to note that option 2 is in green. Green means go. That's the one that was selected and received the 3s and the 4s. Okay, so I didn't want to keep you in suspense, so I made that one green. But just so everybody's aware, I can just kind of talk through a few key points of each option. When you look at option 1, again, if you're looking at the 7th grade, that would entail creating a 7th grade section, or 2 or 3, of phys ed during periods 2 and or 3. Period 2 is one of the special periods, so like art, music, happen during that time, STEAM special, that kind of stuff. Period 3 is like an advisory or a world language. And so some of our 7th grade students do enroll in world language. If in fact, and by the way, I have to remind everybody, this is for non-accelerated students who are in music ensembles, okay? So I will share with you the number of students we're looking at currently who would be involved in this decision.
Excuse me, Dr.
Oh, sorry,
Could you just explain the term ensemble?
Sure,
You know
absolutely.
that, but I'm not sure.
No, that's a great point. Ensemble here is considered band, chorus, or orchestra, okay? Whereas music class is just a general music class, but an ensemble could be the band, the chorus, the orchestra, all right? And all of those meet right now, period 11. Period 11 is like the last academic period of the day. It's not that extra day, not that extra part of the day, it's that last period of the day. So the problem is the extra math sections are all being pulled from period 11. And so that's what we're fighting over, is this use of period 11, right? We're all trying to figure out how to use these kids during that period. So one of the options, option 1, is what if we create an extra PE section, because that's offered during period 11, not in period 11, but put it into their special rotation or into advisory for 7th grade. If a kiddo would take a world language, the advisory period would be out, because that's really where that student attends. So then we would have to look at period 2. Well, there's 4 quarters, there are 4 quarter courses. We would have to substitute and put phys ed in the place of one of those quarter courses. The group decided, as we were talking, if we were to have selected this, we would have taken the student, because it's already in those music ensembles, out of the music quarter course and put phys ed in place, okay? The positive about this option is that the students would not miss any period 11 ensembles. So if they were in one ensemble, they can go there 4 periods, period 11 days, and they'd have exactly what they have now. If they were in 2 ensembles, they could go to 2 4-band period 11 days and 2 chorus period 11 days, and then the 2 math. It would be unchanged, same as what they have now. Because now they would just go to study hall instead of the math. Or PE. So we really, that option 1 doesn't change their period 11 ensemble sessions. However, it does have an impact on PE. Instead of PE happening period 11 throughout the whole year. So 2 cycle days, 2 periods each cycle. So that's 60 days spread out over the entire school year. It would only be 1 quarter. That'd be 45 consecutive days. That's not ideal for like lifelong fitness and promoting those kind of pieces. The phys ed department really felt strongly that kids should receive phys ed over the course of the entire year. And also some of the scheduling that we would have to do to make this happen is a bit of a challenge. So 8th grade, just so you know, 8th grade for option 1 is very similar, except we weren't looking at periods 2 and 3. We were looking at just period 1, having the quarter course exchange for music to go to PE. But again, that means 45 days in a row of phys ed and then nothing else across the year. So ultimately, option 1 was not a chosen or selected option for this particular plan. Option 2 on the back was the green. It is the go. It's the same for 7th and 8th grade, so that makes it a little bit easier to explain. Think period 11. Everything's going to happen in period 11 just like it does now. Okay? So what does that mean? If I am in one ensemble, orchestra, instead of going for 4 days of the cycle, I'm only going for 3. If I am in 2 ensembles, orchestra and chorus, actually, let me use a different example that's on your paper for ease. If I am in 2 ensembles, I am in band and chorus. On day 1, I'm going to go to band, because everybody who is in band goes to band on day 1. If I'm in chorus, I'm going to go to chorus on day 2, because everybody who's in chorus goes to chorus on day 2. Day 5, 1 cycle I'm going to go to band, the next cycle I'm going to go to chorus. The next cycle I'm going to go to band, next cycle I'm going to go chorus. I'm going to go back and forth. We talked about, would it be better by quarter, would it be better and by semester? Because of concerts and activities, the music department said, we can live with this if we can swap off cycle to cycle. Okay, we can make that work, as long as the kids can remember where they're supposed to go, which day and which cycle. But I'll be honest, some of the kids' schedule is crazy like this anyway, so they figure it out. The positive here, I mean, when you look at it as far as PE, you might say, wait a minute, you're going from 60 class sessions across the year down to 30. That's less than option 1. And the PE department prefers this because it's 30 classes throughout the year, so it's 1 day a cycle. They will have phys ed. And interestingly, and I didn't know this, and I probably should have known this, but there are already students who do have phys ed only 1 period a cycle. Some of our students who have GIEPs are pulled for GIEP work during the time they would have gone to PE. So this is not a new situation. Some of the students, there are a few students who have IEPs that actually they're pulled from phys ed 1 day a cycle to go over to get some accommodations met. So the PE department said, we already deal with this, we can make this work. And the music department, even though it's a little bit less of an ensemble in period 11, they felt as though they prefer this than any of the other options. So this was the one endorsed by the group. Just a bit of option 3 is, this is a little bit of thinking out of the box thinking, and dismissal time for students is 2:35, but we have the 2:35 to 3:05 time where students may work with teachers. We already do run Camerata, which is the special choral group that you have to try out for. It's very highly selective. That group meets 1 day a cycle at 2:35. The marching band meets at 2:35 during their seasonal work. And so there are a couple of groups that meet during that time. So the option was to utilize what I call period 12 after the technical school day to keep kids there. So if they were going to band day 1, like they do, period 11, they actually stay there for a double session, period 12, until 3:05. Since we do run the activity buses and such, you're getting the same number of sessions. It's just 3 of them would occur in period 11, 1 of them would occur in period 12, if that makes sense, which is technically after the school day. This one was not a 5 or a 4 or a 3, and I think probably because you have to understand that ensembles are graded, and so we haven't done anything with graded courses after 2:35. And so that might open up a bit of a can of worms, and we might have to talk about that down the road. So we just, for the purposes of this, option 3 was not selected. It's not a favored option. So that's, again, a little bit why, option 2 was the selected. I said there's nothing wrong with thinking out of the box. So I was trying to think, about anything that we could to make this work. So I know this is not easy. When I met with Mrs. Kuhn, I had a sheet this long, and we were just projecting it and trying to talk through each talking point. I tried to condense it as much as possible while still making sense of these key points. But I don't know if anyone has any questions around these. One thing I do want to point out, though, in the next slides, thank you, is when you take a look at this, I know the question was, last time we met, how many students are we talking? How many kiddos are in a music ensemble, band, chorus, orchestra, who are in non-accelerated math courses in 7th and 8th grade? All these caveats there. I highlighted those couple of numbers. First of all, I tried to give you current numbers, so current kids in 7th grade and current kids in 8th grade. Now note that in 23-24, the students 14 and 5, this won't affect them next year because they'll be in 9th grade, okay? So the highlighted numbers are the ones who are affected as we know it right now. There are 5 students in 7th grade who attend a 4-day ensemble. That means they're in either band, chorus, or orchestra, and they go there 4 days a cycle. So there are 5 of those students who are in non-accelerated math. In 7th grade, there are 3 students who are in 2 ensembles. Whatever the configuration is, they are in 2 ensembles who are in non-accelerated math. So there are 8 students in 7th grade who are impacted by this, okay? Again, there could be more next year. There could be more just because of where they fall in math next year, or if they decide to join another ensemble. I just am giving you the numbers based on right now, okay? I gave you last year's numbers just because somebody might say, well, what do these numbers typically look like? So I gave you 22, 23 as well. But again, it's really neither here nor there, it's just kind of a sense of context. And we've already identified at the moment the students who are interested in band, chorus, and orchestra for next school year who are currently in 6th grade. But we haven't figured out their math yet, so we don't have all of the pieces to that puzzle. That's why I did not put this year's 6th grade in there, because we're still going, we're going to spend the next couple of months going through criteria for accelerated math versus non-accelerated math. So, and I do know too that our music teachers are doing a nice job of trying to recruit students into music, at 5th and 6th grade. That's one of Mrs. Phillips, who's a primary music teacher at West Reading. She's doing a great job. So the key is to continue to allow students to engage in their passion and to follow their passion while trying to still figure out how we can, meet the math needs too. So I hope that helps to kind of clarify anything, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them for you.
I have two quick questions. One, it's a relatively small number of students, but what is the communication plan to get that out to the parents and the families involved? And the second, how are you planning to measure and monitor the progress towards this? Is it just through things like PSSAs, or is it a more regular basis to see that you're achieving the marks you're trying to shoot for?
The problem with just relying on PSSA is it's a one snapshot kind of approach, and you only get the information in June or July from the previous year, and so we do have to bring in many more indicators of success than just a state assessment. And so we have done a pretty good job, I believe, of bringing in more diagnostic assessment, and that's actually a beauty of some of what is driving identifying students, whether they're going to be accelerated or not. Not just a class grade, because that can also be a little subjective and such, but we have students on our IXL diagnostic, and we are enriching students, we are remediating students, we are seeing how much students are growing within the year, which is telling us quite a bit of information. So, and then not to mention just observation and daily, work and tests and those kind of pieces. In addition, we have classroom diagnostic tests, CDTs, so we do those on about 3 times a year. So we are pulling data from a lot of different places to make the decisions where kids are going to best meet. I think you mentioned about the communication plan. We actually have to, and we thought about doing this actually later this month, we have to communicate to all of our parents, we believe, who are currently in 6th grade and who are currently in 7th grade. Everyone, because of the course sequence change. So the people who are in pre-algebra in 7th grade right now aren't going to Algebra 1, they're going to algebraic concepts. So we want to get that word out there. So it's not necessarily just a communication to this number of students who are directly impacted by this, but everybody who's going to see not just 6 periods of math instruction, but 8. And part of that is happening with, the course selection night, and those kind of pieces is trying to get that information out there. But we were planning to, at the end of February, send out a letter just to our current 6th and current 7th grade parents, just to let them know. Some wouldn't know there was a change just because they've never had anybody, but for others, that sequence is a big change, and also how it can potentially affect us. So I actually have to be in contact, we're consulting with West Reading because they're gonna send out information about what music could look like next year. And I'm like, hang on, we still needed to make some final decisions as to, we can't say your student will definitely have band 4 days a week because they may only have it 3 days a week. So really kind of tightening that all up and making that clear to our families. So that'll be coming, like I said, within the next month or so, to kind of fine tune all of that. But I think it is, those folks need to understand, but I think in broader sense, so does everyone else with the big changes that we're making.
And regarding measurement, one of the things I think might be important is that when we created the strategic plan 2 years ago and we put math as one of the primary areas, at that time we didn't feel that we had, strategic plans I think should be measurable. And at that time when we talked about how could we measure math progress, like you're asking, we weren't really sure yet that we were ready and that we were quite in a place yet to make those commitments, but we did commit to doing it later, which would be now. So when we in the spring talk about the strategic plan as a group of the board, I'm hoping that we'll be able, with the help of the administration, to set some really measurable goals and objectives so we know what we're shooting for and we can on a yearly or semi-annual basis say, are we making progress toward those measurables?
It is amazing. I mean, the issue with some of the information we have is so student specific. So, I can tell you how, certain students do and how much they're growing, and I can trend and generalize, but, it's a combination of the state assessment data that's easier to kind of say, okay, this is our proficiency. This is, this is our lack of proficiency percentage and where we're going. But when you want to get down to the nitty gritty, we've got a lot more of on that for each student, which I think is really helpful.
Yeah. I just wanted to tack on to Mr. Schippers about the communication. Is that going to include communicating to the students that it's not a punishment? Because I know some folks were concerned about these kids are going to see this as a punishment. So does that include the communication to the kids that this is not a punishment, this is a necessity, and explaining those things too?
We can certainly incorporate that. And it's so interesting because when I heard that comment before, we don't just generalize that having 2 periods of ELA is a punishment. It's just what we do. And so we've got to get to the point where 2 periods of math is just what we do, because when you look at the numbers and the minutes, it's just so much less than what would be expected.
Maybe that's the key, is just illustrating the difference in the minutes between, so, they're used to getting a certain amount of minutes in 5th and 6th.
Right.
It's a little different format because delivering it by period, but that chart is pretty telling that, when we add the new minutes in, at least we're closer to where we were, K-4 and 5-6, but.
And I think saying where we are, within the county too, I think is like an important piece of that. Like, no, we're not punishing you. You guys have actually had less math minutes than, many of the other districts. So it's, but it's like, you're right, though, like saying it in the right way and getting that
The first
across.
group might feel that a little more.
Yes,
than the second and
correct,
third group.
right. After that,
Especially if you don't like math.
yes.
Right, I can see that if you have an older brother or sister and it's different,
Right.
your hearing is different, you can perceive it a little bit, but I think after a year or two.
And I think, even down the road, well, if there's ever a possibility we can have double math period for everybody in 7th and 8th grade, then it also doesn't look like you're singling out the non-accelerated diversity accelerated students, even though it might be a 75% who get it and 25% who don't. If it can be 100% down the road, we just can't get there yet. Then it wouldn't be noticeable, So we don't want to punish, and we also want to make sure that we allow students to continue engaging and participating in the music that they really want to be a part of too. So, and that's another piece. Certainly they said the 2:35 time, even though we're not going into that time frame for a whole ensemble, that time is open for the teachers to work with students for an extra lesson or something like that. So if a student needs that extra support or wants that extra support, that 2:35 time is available, but just not formally as everybody is taking band during that time. So.
And will it be labeled or marketed as a math lab instead of second math?
It's just math. It's not math second. It's just the math in their coursework. It's not denoted as anything different except than just math. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
You mentioned the IXL diagnostic, and I do think I know what that is, but can you just spend 1 minute elaborating on how that IXL diagnostic that you're saying is used to place kids in math works?
So it's not the only piece, and it's actually new, well, it was brand new last year, IXL diagnostic, but we've kind of continued to incorporate it this year. But what we're using, and we really are using it K to 6 very much so this year. We're trying to figure out ways to extend it into junior middle school. I will be honest, when you only have 41 minutes a day, it's really hard to then add something else into the 41-minute block. But what it is the students take a diagnostic early in the year. So it's an assessment, and then from that assessment, they're placed on a level. Every week, they must spend about 15 to 20 minutes on that level answering questions. It's called, I'm going in the arena. I'm in the arena, and that arena gives me questions that are matching my level. I grow with that, and in math, it's numbers and operations, it's geometry, it's fractions, it's algebraic, pieces of developmentally, of course. It grows with you, or if it notes that you have a deficit, it adapts and gives you foundational skills. So we have really seen great things. And so the goal is that every week, kids are in their arena so that their levels are current. I will tell you, we have a 6th grade team who is using it, making sure their students are on it, 15, 20, 25 minutes a week throughout the week. And we have students who are doing, and talk about accelerated or enriched, we have students who are doing Algebra 2 in 6th grade. And if you recall, I think when I first got here, people were like, whatever happened to double accelerated math, and what happened to this? And we haven't had the numbers of students to be able to really move kids in that direction. We are looking at the possibility of having students bypass a level because of what they are doing. We had Megan Tierney down at the West Reading building looking at this data with us, and she said, this is crazy. These kids are learning how to do this through this device, and it just keeps working with them. On the opposite end, we have students in 6th grade who are working at the 2nd and 3rd grade levels, and yet they can get what they need there. So the diagnostic piece, being adaptive, is very helpful. At the same time, they're still working on grade level expected content and standards with the teachers. So this is kind of supporting and supplementing that. So we can get into that a little bit more in depth when we do the data, another data look at it, because we found some really great success, and we have students working in their arena in English language arts as well as in math. But you really see the differentiation when it's in math. And some of the awesome work the kids are doing. So it's a good, and just so you know, that is not, I want to make sure that I make this clear. That is one piece in helping us to identify whether a student is ready for accelerated or not. Based on, if a student is right where he should be and doing really well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's an accelerated student. It means it's a good achieving kiddo, but we don't want to just put kids in who don't have the abilities and the foundations to be successful into an accelerated class. So it helps us, give us some additional data that we wouldn't normally get just by sitting in the classroom.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was just going to ask, based on what you said, we're not doing this for all the students basically because of staffing, is kind of what I'm gathering.
Yeah, if we could have more math for everybody, I'd have more math for everybody.
And then my other question is with the band and orchestra and all the different, how is this going to affect how often the entire band is together? So they're kind of different now, I think.
They are different now. It's amazing that we don't have anybody in 3 ensembles currently.
Right.
Okay, we only have 1 or 2. That's why I gave you that information. But they're between phys ed currently, between different ensembles, they are guaranteed to be together at least once per cycle. But they might be together twice. But in our proposed setup, they're only gonna officially be together once. But there aren't many that are more than that, right? I was surprised by that. There are people moving and shaking from period 11 all over the place. So and it's interesting because our new orchestra teacher said, my goodness, we did reflection on our winter concert this year, and a couple of the kids said, it would have been nice if we were together more. So even currently, they're not together a lot, like you would have expected it to be. So that's what I learned, when we were going through this with Ms. Barra. She was really trying to help us understand. And those certain day cycles are preserved. So we know we cannot pull a kid out for music, on 1, 2, or 5, because those are specific to the ensembles. So you really are working with 3, 4, and 6, I think, if I'm not right. And so that's part of our whole scheduling, putting the puzzle pieces together. And we were able to figure it out, but it's tough. So I guess, long story short, they're not together as frequently as you'd expect now, but they will at least be together minimally one period 11 a cycle.
I have a question, and this may be completely silly. I'm just trying to get context. Why does the day end so early?
That's our student day. As far as, and again, yes, so at 2:35, previous to this year, we ended at 2:15. But we added the late start a little bit, so that kind of pushed us to 2:35. But yeah, that's our instructional minute schedule.
There's some things that are kind of built around the county, and they're not perfect answers. One is there's the career center that all the districts use. So everyone's on a pretty close schedule to try to use the career center. For us, that's about 75 kids. There's extracurricular activities. So those take place around the county. Junior high, like right after school, and then high school sometimes in the evening. We don't have any lights, so that adds a little extra challenge for us if you're involved in extracurricular in the late fall or the early spring seasons. So there's these things that the board, the 4 board members who have been here, were working all these the last couple of years, and we got a change. We were able to move the start time a little bit later, about 30 minutes. And then we moved the end time about 20 minutes. Now there is that optional period where kids can stay for about 35 minutes. They can stay and participate in clubs. There's a study hall for junior high kids who are staying for sports. And I know there's some music activities, and you can stay with a teacher. So if you just, a teacher might say, hey, period, for day 1, 3, I'm staying, for remediation or to make up a test. So it's an optional period that the kids all can stay, but in reality, the majority of the kids don't stay. Probably about, we just say, Dr. Wood, about 80% of the kids are leaving from what we track, going home. About 20-25% of the kids are staying, for that period. And then we do have a late bus. So if you do want to stay, you can catch the late bus home. But they're not really great reasons. They're kind of just how high schools are kind of built around the county. Now, we were hoping other districts in the county might do what we did and move their start time later. And if more schools did that, that would help us in the long run, because that would force the BCTC to move a little bit later, and sports would move a little bit later, and things like that. So we're hopeful that that movement will catch on. We were just maybe a little bit ahead. And but we will, you heard Dr. Woodard talk about is that if this board wants to, over the next 6 months or a year, it actually could be a study topic of looking at our schedule again and looking at it deeper to determine, does this board want to make some long-term changes to that schedule? So, there's nothing that we're doing that we have to do forever. We will be probably trying to study it with the board over the next 6 months or a year to see, is there a better way to deliver these services to the kids? So I know it's not a great answer. That's kind of
no, it's helpful. It's helpful.
We were doing.
For context, I didn't grow up in this area.
Right.
So the middle school classes were held from 8 to 3:30, and then Tuesday they had an early day that ended at 2. And what that did is it gave students 2 opportunities to have elective courses throughout their day, because we had a permanent 8-period schedule. So when I was thinking, I was like, well, we need more time in the day, obviously.
Yeah.
Right? Because what a shame to cut PE, given, you know, the obesity epidemic that we're all facing.
Absolutely.
But we don't want to cut music and we don't want to cut math, so.
And then the other puzzle piece that's a big piece is you need about, about 35 to 40 minutes between the two big schools,
Right.
the elementary and the high school, because of busing, unless you duplicate your entire fleet. So we were able to go from a 3-stop busing, I think, to a 2-stop busing. The nice part of West Reading is it's so small, you can kind of group it either side and still get away with your busing. But that was the other challenge is, you know, do we have the elementary students go much later and let our students out here earlier, or do we flip them? So there are some pieces that make it hard, but it doesn't make it impossible.
Yeah.
And there might be areas we can improve a little bit as we work together as a board over the next 6 months or a year.
I would say it does, as a parent with kids in sports, it does get tight
Yeah.
with sports after, you know, sometimes your kids are coming home from games at 10 o'clock at night and having to do their homework. And so having that time between school and practice or games does provide them time to do homework then before the games, but tons of considerations.
Right.
And we are, just for clarification too, 990 hours is what we need our students to, you know, complete at the secondary level and 900 hours at the elementary. So how do we figure that all out, you know, thinking that's the target number? Typically in 180 days, although that now is up for discussion as well, but we've got to look at that 990 hours in school, and certain minutes don't apply. You know, we can't count lunch, and we can't, you know, there's certain things we can't count within that 990 hours too.
And I apologize if you covered this, but this will take us from the last in the county in terms of minutes to where would we rank?
I'll have to get that information to you
Okay.
specifically, yeah.
Not
Because there are,
the
because, we're not at the very bottom.
So you're saying we're not the worst?
Well, not the worst. There are a bunch that have it half of the cycle days double period. We won't be half, we'll be a third, but it still brings us up, you know, at least kind of much closer to everybody else, so.
And
Yeah.
how are they doing it? Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Aside from block scheduling then, why are we so far below all the other districts? Can you help me understand what I'm missing there?
Realistically, I think it's because we have that 7 to 12 schedule, that junior, senior, high school, 41-minute period. So, and you know, I can talk to it as a parent from, you know, in another district. Jack's schedule looks very different than our 8th grade schedule here. Now, he does not have a language. World language is not available to him until 9th grade. So that's a disadvantage for my son, but an advantage for our students. But he does have a built-in, you know, links period every day. He has the double ELA block, you know, that we have. He does have the 1.5 periods, if you want to call it, of math. He doesn't have as many he doesn't have quarter courses. So they have a trimester course. So even the specials are different. So when you look at that, you know, it's definitely more of a middle school schedule than a junior high schedule.
Right, like your son might not have art, right, for like a whole year.
Yeah, he had music.
That's how their schedule is, but
Right.
our kids all have that, so it's sort of like a trade-off, like,
Yeah.
you know.
He had music one time in middle school for a trimester. He will not have it again. You know.
There are kids are getting it every, 7th and 8th graders are both getting it.
Correct. So you have to really realistically look and say, you know, what is important for us? And that's why if we go down that path, that would be committees coming together to say, what do we feel is important? Middle school should be exploratory. Middle school should be, you know, opportunities to look and try different things and try to find our passions, but how do we do that? So I think, you know, and there's less transition time in a lot of middle schools, which you find 3 or 4 minutes here, 3 or 4 minutes there, all of a sudden, that helps a little bit as well. So, you know, it's just something we would have to investigate a little bit further.
So I don't mean to belabor the conversation, but I want to thank you for all the collaboration you did with the staff and the teachers, and I know that was difficult, but I know we all appreciate that you gave them opportunities to at least feel heard. So the part of this that I don't like, obviously, is the reduction in PE. And my concern with it is that it seems to me that you know, we have a competing strategic goal, which is mental health. And one of the most impactful ways we as a school district can make a difference for kids' mental health is to help them move their bodies. And now we just cut it in half. And we have a lot of really sedentary kids, not we, but the nation does already. So I have some pretty dramatic concerns, especially in 7th and 8th grade when their little mental health is going down the tubes. And now we're taking away movement by half is huge to me. So it sounds like you don't believe there's any other options. And I don't mean to suggest I would be the only one to think of this, but in that period 12 from 2:35 to 3:05, what are the PE teachers doing if they're not, like, you know, if that's a period where you're able to go ask for extra help, I would think PE teachers, here's my question. Is there a possibility for us to offer some enticing opportunities to move your body for kids that are not in sports, whose PE just got cut in half?
Like some intramural.
I mean, really fun, super fun, like gaga ball or wild dancing. I mean, something that entices you to have a snack, grab a bottle of water, and stay and move your body and play. I mean, true play, like something, and it would seem that Mrs. Reardon and her team might be able to come up with some stuff. Or maybe they won't stay for it, but at least we've offered it.
Right.
So I don't know if
Yeah,
that's,
I would be all for trying to have a conversation
You
with
probably
them.
sit down
Yeah.
and try to brainstorm.
Right. And again.
We all want kids to stay in that period.
and even if they
We're
were
not
7th
getting
and
kids to
8th
stay.
grade specific,
Mhm.
so it's also a time where social connection is so important to so many of them, and if we could do just something fun, and we pay for snacks, I don't know, it would make me feel better that we were cutting their PE.
That's a great idea.
Right, and again, you know, like we're looking at, it's 8 students for next year in what would be grade 8, but we don't know how many will be in grade 7, and we don't
It's
know.
not
So
all those students.
it's not a lot of
Right.
students, but it is for those particular students. And I'll be honest, you know, I go downstairs in that junior high, what do they call
Study
it?
hall.
Study hall
Yeah.
or whatever, that they're, because the students don't go home and they don't start practice till 15. You know, high school kids can go home and come back, junior high kids go to the caf and they hang out there and they eat a snack and they talk. It would be kind of cool to be able to just get them, you know, that most of those kids are athletes, you know, because they're waiting for practice. But I bet, you know, some of those kids might be interested in doing something, you know, just to be positive and a good social emotional learning and, you know, an opportunity. So I
In
think
long
that's
term,
beneficial.
You know, one of the things we talked about but didn't accomplish was embedding that club period at a different time of the day when the kids would all be here participating as opposed to 75% of them leaving. So there's pros and cons, and certainly Mr. Schippers brought up a good point, you know, the older kids use that time. So we'd have to balance it, but I think that is one of the long-term discussion points too, is there a better utilization of that great resource, which is our best resource, which is our staff. So I think in the short run, we could brainstorm, Mrs. Harenza, some ways to invigorate and you know, maybe make that period more exciting. And then I think long term is really wrestle with what's the best way to embed that period. You know, maybe it's different for middle school and high school. You know, maybe we can create some options and separate the schedules to make them more tailored to the kids at that age group. So that's kind of the short-term and long-term way we could attack it.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, good point.
Anybody else?
I had one question. For scheduling in general, it seems like that since we can't have more hours in a day, I know it's going to be hugely unfavorable, but increasing days to the schedule would that give extra opportunities, like adding days to
It's a 9-day cycle versus
Yeah.
8.
Well, I mean, adding days to the whole schedule as
More than 180.
yeah, more than 180, giving more opportunities throughout the day to keep PE, keep art, keep all of those courses. Would that allow for the time that you need?
I mean, we currently have 180 student days, we have 188 teacher days, so, and
You
that's
have
by
to negotiate
contract.
that.
Right.
Right.
You know, so that would have to be a discussion point down the road. Yeah.
But it's something to think about, you know, certainly, the group just got through a negotiation,
Right.
but I know that comes around before you know it, it's a couple years away, but, you know, if the board at that time says that's a goal to add some days, you know, that the group could at least, discuss that and then see what's the trade-off, you know, pay trade-off for that kind of a.
All right, then we'll move on to capital projects update by Mr. Boyer and Mr. Cafancelli.
And while they're setting up, just so we know, this is, for some board members, kind of the first time looking at projects. Some are smaller and some are potentially bigger. The board, the city board, was starting to talk about some of these things, but it was really important to finish our current construction projects and also get through code. When really there was always, I think, an intent to look at a couple things. But when you see these things tonight, and we have these discussions, by no means, nothing's been decided. Nothing's been, no board has said, hey, we're doing this or not doing it. It's really just putting a couple items back in front to at least start those discussions, and then you tell us, how much more you want or in what direction, and then we bring, more information to you. So when you see these things, they're kind of new in being talked about, but the board previously, about a year ago, had identified maybe at some point when we get closer to done in construction, talk about a couple things and see where we want to go. So,
But it doesn't mean that this board
No.
is bound by
By any
any of
means.
these things. We had not voted in
Right.
any positive way.
just getting some information together.
Thank you, Mr. Scoboria. One of those items was the West Reading Playground renovation. For those of you who were on the tour earlier today, we looked at the space, so this is just going to give you a little background. The last time it was renovated was in 2009. Primary use, we use it for recess, 300 students a day. School events are held out there. A little bit of possible outdoor instructional space. I think it's been used very seldomly so far, but that could be for future use. It's also the site for our evacuation if we needed to do a fire drill or any type we need to leave the building. Secondary use is community use from dusk to dawn on non-school hours. So that's basically how it's been being used now. We're going to go on Mr. Arntz to show a couple pictures and I'll kind of give you an overview. The top picture shows basically the whole space. You have your playground area on the left. You have full court basketball kind of in the middle. The Gaga pit is up to the upper left corner, and then you have a pavilion right on the other side of that. Basically asphalt everywhere around except for the mulched in area around the plate. So as you can see, it's it's showing some wear, it's showing some age. The fencing is starting to bow. The asphalt definitely is fading from getting beat by the sun. The playground equipment is inspected twice a year, and it's in really good shape. We don't have any issues with the playground equipment, so that could be something, if we choose to move forward with a renovation, that could be something we could salvage and relocate and look to actually improve it. There are other items that you can do with the mulch versus the rubber material underneath, so there's opportunities to upgrade as well. So like Mr. Scoboria said, this is something we can talk about. We can form a committee and have see where our focus wants to be, whether it's making an outdoor instructional space, just bringing it up to 21st century, creating shaded areas, or just basic maintenance. If you want to go to the next slide, Mr. Arntz. So this will just give the board kind of an aerial to give you perspective. At the bottom of your screen, that's Chestnut. And then on the left-hand side of the screen is Fifth Avenue. You have the pavilion down in the lower left-hand corner. So that kind of just gives you an overview of the project. If the board chooses to move forward, thanks, Mr. Arntz, next slide. Some of the next steps would be to form committees with some of our stakeholders. You got the staff, obviously, community members, board members, district administration, the borough, police department, PTA, I know they've partnered with purchasing some equipment. Olivet's, that is currently using the space. I think that group would give us a good idea of where we want to go. And then if we get some direction, we can start interviewing consultants and architects and see if we want to take this to the next step. That's like the 500,000 view of it. So if
May I
there's
ask
any,
you a question?
absolutely.
Sorry, about a year ago, we had a resident who brought to our attention some, I would call them more maintenance concerns.
Sure.
It was some various things, some some rusty things, some railroad ties that were getting disintegrated. Did we fix those maintenance-y things, or are they, is that, we were rolling that into this larger
We
discussion?
fixed some of the maintenance things that were more of a safety concern,
Okay.
but some of the pictures that were taken were kind of bigger and would
Okay.
require a larger project. We did evaluate from a safety perspective.
As you put together the program for this, are you going to consider potential fundraising opportunities for like buy a rubber brick, for partnership with corporations or nonprofits who may want to look into helping with providing accessibility to the playground, those sorts of things?
I think that would all be great, and that's something we could discuss.
To piggyback
Absolutely.
off of that, I was gonna say, bringing it up to par with ADA compliance so that any disabled students that we have an opportunity to play would be great. And I think that'd go a long way for modernizing it as well.
And there are several schools, elementary schools in the county that have made all ability playground
Accessible.
equipment. Yeah.
And that would most likely be a requirement when we get to that point with the architect, and that they would help us kind of make sure we're focusing on those
Yeah.
needs. Absolutely. Any other questions about the overall space or?
So we would obviously also be soliciting information from parents and, you know, students, that kind of thing too. I assume like it's, I don't know if we do a survey or
Yeah, we
something
could do
like that,
surveys.
just to see,
We could
just for
probably
us to be able to gauge like how
could have some
important
students
this is to the community.
participate as well, current students. Yeah, if the board kind of wants us to take the first step of getting some people together, seeing what's out there, that would be, we'd outline maybe a strategy for doing that with the board and get some more input from you, but start to put together some stakeholder groups that could, you know, give us that information, maybe help us see what is important. You know, it's a tricky space because some of the great ideas aren't conducive to 150 kids on it at one time. You know, if you were only had 30 kids on it at a time or 50 kids on it at a time. So it is a trick when you sit down in there to also for that group to see what it's like when there's 150 kids on it, you know, either the 5th grade or the 6th grade. So if we had a stakeholder group or committee, maybe we could also have them observe, you know, when the kids are out there to kind of see, you have to have equipment and things that work for 150 kids. That's the primary purpose of it. And that's a great thing and also a challenge. You know, some equipment wouldn't be safe for 150 kids. You know, you think of like a swing with a really wide, you know, things like that. You just, you know, you have big groups of kids. Basketball's a key one. I'm a basketball guy, so it kills me to say this, but, you know, there was some push a couple years ago to maybe have a second Gaga pit, keep half-court basketball, but maybe not necessarily have full-court basketball, have hoops that the kids could shoot at, half-court, maybe have another Gaga pit. So we would love to get people together to hear what ideas people have. You know, those ideas are different ideas. I know our students would probably love to get involved. I know they like projects like that to kind of look at a space. So if you want, we could just kind of put our heads together and outline a kind of a timeline and a process to get some really good stakeholder input, and then the board could decide after that if there's enough to go to a next level, which would be bringing in some professionals to see if they wanted to submit a proposal or something.
I mean, I live in West Reading, my kids use the playground. I know how the community feels about the playground. It's 15 years that anything has been done there, if I did the math right. Yeah. I think it's time to definitely do something. What that looks like, I mean, I have a bunch of ideas in my head, but I don't want to see this project turn into like, let's talk about, do we need a committee? Let's get a committee. Let's talk about what the committee's going to do. Let's send out surveys. Do you know what? I want to see it come together in less time, if then other projects take, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we outline a timeline, at least to suggest to the board, you know, a way to get some input, you know, help the board kind of just hear what people have to say, you know, residents as well, so whether you live in West Reading Borough or students, and kind of get a mix of opinions. But yeah, we don't want it to be multiple years of thinking about it, but
Yeah.
we did think there was an opportunity to take a couple months and, bring people together and, kind of maybe broaden a little bit of what we think would be the best use of the space there.
Yeah, to echo what Terrie said, I've had complaints from residents that have come up to me and expressed their concern about the district's lack of investment, and I've talked with Kate about this, and I think we all acknowledge or at least agree that we do need to update the facilities. 15 years is a very long time. As a resident and parent of a child that lives in West Reading, I'd absolutely be willing to, I guess, hit the ground and get people to fill out surveys and get feedback and stuff like that. So just wanted to throw a little +1 in there with Terrie.
Well, it's up to the board, but we would be looking for one of the board members to kind of help us along that path. So certainly we'll outline that and let you think a little bit, but if board members would like to get involved, then, we want a mixed group too. So, a couple board members, so it's not, just, we don't want 10 administrators in the group either. You don't want to overwhelm it, but you want a nice variety of a mix of people so certainly board members that are interested, I'd love to talk with you more if the board wants to at least form a committee.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, would it be conversation to talk about a full renovation or cost-effective things that we could get volunteers to be actively involved in that? Like, let's say something down the line, like a plan comes up that there's a possibility to like make an interactive wall, like how the elementary has with certain things. Like, would we be able to have students and teachers be part of that, like how it was at the elementary, to make like
Volunteer.
mosaic and everything like that, to have that part of
I don't see why not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I know there's some teachers at West Reading that would like to get the kids out more.
Yeah.
And they've been active with some grants with WAVE. So just like the Hills, there was a couple teachers kind of leading that push. There are a couple at West Reading that would like to make the space also attractive, that kids could, with supervision, go out there during the day, get some fresh air, learn outside, and have equipment that would be safe and durable, but at the same time, usable beyond the recess. So I know some of you know there's a couple teachers there that have been kind of looking for this. So we'd certainly look to include them in that.
I'd love to see the students really involved. I know right now, 5th grade is doing some community charity projects in their homerooms. I really don't know exactly what that entails, but that would be a neat thing for them to get involved in learning about writing letters to ask for funding and what are your thoughts for a good playground, and get them involved at that level.
All right.
So
Moving forward, sounds like you have some support for this one, Ms. McKenna.
Yeah.
more to follow.
Absolutely, we'll move forward on that. All right, Mr. Torres.
Did you front load that one, because nobody can say no to that one? That was very clever.
Strategic. I will let Mr. Boyer do the intro on this one, and then we'll move forward.
Okay, now that we got the West Reading kind of going there, we're going to dive kind of into the capital projects plan. Just a couple of things before we actually go look at the plan. One, the items are numbered on the plan, but they're not in any particular order. So when you see them, they're just a list. As Mr. Scoboria said, it's just some ideas, some things that do need to be maintained, some things that will need to be maintained in the future. And what we're looking at here is just basically large-scale assets or projects that involve the building, furniture and fixtures, anything that basically has a life over 5 years. The funding for this comes from basically two sources. One is our capital reserve fund. Now it's funded by also two sources. One is fund balance or transfers from the general fund, or from bond or financing. We're kind of at the end of our financing, our $25 million, which was for the renovation project. So we do have some funds left over from that. The majority of the funding that you'll see here will actually be coming from our reserves or our fund balance. So the majority of these things will actually be paid, hopefully in cash. But there is the opportunity to, at some point, if we need to, go back out for bond for financing. The forecast here will not actually show that part, because that's to be determined. But at the end of this, which we probably won't get too much into, but when you view it on your own, there is a section in there that has kind of our funding sources and projecting out the spend for the next 5 years based upon the estimates that you will see in there. Once again, a lot of it going in the out years are estimates. They're not really, we don't really have a proposal or a any type of actual project cost in hand. It's just kind of where we're estimating it would be. All right? Okay. So, I'll kind of take the first one here. Once again, nothing is in any specific order, because solar conversion, although it's dear to my heart, is not number one on the list actually, but it is here. We did have a gentleman by the name of Doug Niederlich, who was from Greenworks, come in and speak to the board last fall, I believe it was, to kind of do some proposals, did some preliminary work. He actually did a lot of work with our students who are still actually actively working with solar. There was a solar panel up on our roof. There's one of the junior senior high school building. There is no price to this because this is still in flux yet as far as what this would actually mean cost-wise for the district. There is actually new legislation that is being introduced that has some strong backing that could actually provide more funding to schools that do convert to solar. So this is still one of those projects that's out there, but we want on your radar that we could come back to say, hey, we got strong interest from the students to kind of move this forward because it'd be still that connection between students and a solar project here. But we're still kind of at that point of influx with this yet. So we probably bring out Doug from Greenworks to kind of give that explanation, kind of reorient the board to what a solar project would look like for the district, and then also go through the actual cost of that, because there is a lot of nuances when you get to paying for solar and who pays for it, right? It might not be the district's cost until 5 years later. So there might be no cost to the district to do this for the actual solar project, but there is a cost that could be for testing our roofs to make sure that they're sound, not that our roofs are not sound, but that we don't need to then move solar panels once we get them 2 years later because we have a leak in the roof. So we'll be doing some testing on the roofs just to make sure we're good there for an extended period of time if we were to go forward with this. So we have a lot of work done with this, but we're not getting to the point where we should bring it to the board as far as this would be the cost, this would be the benefit of that actual project.
Okay. To piggyback on that a little bit, the solar could also touch a few other of these items on the list as well. So I'll kind of touch on that as I go through. So number 2, Flannery Field Phase 2. Give you a brief overview, but we're going to go into depth on February 28th. The feasibility study is back. We've met with some stakeholders. We have some coaches meetings set up. So we're gathering a lot of good information. On the 28th, we're going to dig in. But essentially, this Phase 2, in Phase 1, we covered the track primarily, and now we're going to move out to softball, baseball, and the track pavilion, and lots. So we'll talk about that more on the 28th.
The 28th is a tour optional before the meeting. We'll remind you in the Friday, we'll send a calendar invite. But that would be a more in-depth tour to actually go up into Flannery, maybe some parts of it that you haven't looked at. We did that, I don't know, 5 years ago, before we did Phase 1. The board kind of went up, walked the property. So again, no decisions have been made. It's just to give you information. And then, but we'll have a whole night kind of dedicated to talk some more about Flannery Field.
And can you generally tell the folks what a feasibility study is? Because when I was new, I did not understand what that is.
Okay, so we went out for RFP and came back with Turf Track and Court. He's a landscape architect, and he did a study on the Flannery Field complex, and basically gave us suggestions that met our needs, where places to improve, where we need to, because the PIAA has standards for certain width between home plate and the backstop. I'm just giving certain examples. So basically making sure our facilities are up to code, also up to the PIAA standards, and it's basically an a la carte list of some are wish list items and some are items that are, you know, just general things that just need to be addressed. So when we walk through it on the 28th, it's several pages. It's about a 20-page document that it's going to give you a good idea of our needs and our wants and our current conditions of the facility, if that makes sense.
But just big picture thinking for you guys who are new, like when I first saw one of these formed, you know, it sort of freaked me out, like, oh my gosh, these are huge numbers, are we committed to this? Like, Flannery's a good example of that. I don't mean to, you know, we had a discussion before you guys were on the board then, right? It was right before you came on. And there were definitely several members who were not in favor of voting for $2.5 million for Flannery Fields. And we acknowledged that. So, and what we decided was, okay, Mr. Capanzelli, we agree that, how much was it for the feasibility, or the second study that we're doing?
$8,000.
Okay, so we'll agree to $8,000 to further refine our understanding of what might be needed. But hey, you know, $100,000 for a particular part of the project isn't sitting great with a lot of us. And so he's going to do that and come back to us. I just want you to understand, this is just like stuff we're thinking about in the future, to discuss in the future, but no commitments. You would still have the opportunity to say at a later date when you see more specifics, this doesn't feel right to me, or this is a priority over this, or so that's how that big picture goes.
Absolutely. All right, number 3, turf field replacement. Our turf field, which was our field hockey field in the back of the junior senior high school, was put in 2014, 2015. Comes with an 8-year warranty, so we were out of warranty. But we have 2 tests that we do every year. It's called GMAX testing, basically testing that is still the field is safe for competition. We are passing the GMAX testing with flying colors. We groom it twice a year. We keep up on the maintenance. So at the moment, the field's in good shape. But they do recommend between 10 and 12 years, which we're getting close. That's your typical replacement cycle. So we haven't pushed out to 27, 28. We'll keep an eye on it and we'll keep talking about it. But it's just kind of something that's going to be on there. That way for the board, it's not a surprise. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, is that just used for field hockey? What else is that field used for?
I call it pretty much it's a multi-use field.
Okay.
Lots of practice on it. Football uses it. Lacrosse uses it.
Okay.
Multiple sports, outside groups. It's heavily used.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you know if those recommendations are structured around safety or integrity of the turf itself?
Safety. Yeah, it's based on the concussion protocol.
And for the new board members, the track, I think, made it about 12 to 14 years.
Yeah, you're right in that range.
And so in phase 1 of Flannery, we replaced the track itself, which is a similar material, but it has a life and starts to disintegrate. So we've been doing a good job by maintaining it. Some districts don't maintain their turf, so they go quicker. But it is something that we just wanted to make sure everyone was aware it's probably out there at some point to be refreshed.
Absolutely. All right, 4 and 5 I'm going to go pretty quick on. So these 2 items, you may be saying, oh, we're going to do softball and baseball. Why isn't this incorporated in the Flannery Field project? This is maintenance that is kind of ongoing. And in the project, when we go over the feasibility study, we are not touching either infield. That's not moving, that's not part of the renovation. So we have these separate because honestly, we can do these cheaper by keeping them out of the project and not doing prevailing wage. So that's why you'll see them separated, and we have these on a cycle. It's about 5 to 7 years. We bring in additional diamond tacks, and this is another safety thing. You know, we got to make sure there's enough diamond tacks to make sure everything's safe for our student athletes.
But if you were to look at an electronic scoreboard, for example, for softball, then that would fall not in that line item, it would be back in the Flannery.
That's in the Flannery Field project as of right now. That's one of the a la carte items that we can either do in that project, or quite frankly, we can pull it out and do it at any time. So, okay. All right, number 6, this one's just basic sidewalk replacement around the district. We do an assessment pretty much every summer that we walk around, we look for any tripping points, we work with our insurance company to make sure we don't have any liabilities around the district, and if there are, we take care of it. So we have a placeholder in there, about $15,000, that we work through and replace sections of sidewalk. West Reading Playground, we've discussed. Auditorium stage lighting replacement. So, Mr. Boyer and I have been doing a lot of work on this one. We hope to have the last quote. Actually, they're coming in to finalize the audit this Wednesday, so we hope to have the next last quote soon and bring this information back to you. But just a general overview of the project. The stage lighting at the junior senior high school auditorium, there are several fixtures that are just end of life. You know, some of them go back as far as the early 90s. We are currently renting fixtures to host our performances. Sorry, I'm not a stage guy, so I'm going to struggle through this one. But we are looking at converting not only the stage lighting, but also the house lighting and a couple other areas in the junior senior high school to LED. So Mr. Boyer and I are looking for grant opportunities. We're also looking for ways of potentially making this an energy savings project where you get like a guaranteed energy savings back. We're looking at rebates through PP&L. So we have a lot of information gathered, and we hope to bring this back to the board soon to give you guys an update. But this is something we want to move on sooner than later so we can avoid renting lights next year for, I believe, $40,000 was the number. Yeah.
It'll pay for itself in a couple of years.
That's the hope. And just converting to LED, it's going to save quite a bit of energy as well. So overall, it's going to be a win-win, and hopefully we get some longer longevity out of these fixtures.
It'll be better for the kids. They won't be as hot on stage too.
Absolutely. All right, this is another one that I'm just going to throw out there, kind of like the turf field, tennis court resurfacing. These are our courts, the ones that are located over adjacent to Bob Wolfram Field. 4 courts. Once again, we are maintaining them, we're power washing them regularly, we're checking for low points, but after so long, there is a resurfacing that needs to be done just based on wear. I know our friends that play pickleball, they're heavily using the 2 that are lined for pickleball, so it's great that they're being used, but there will be a resurfacing. Similar to if you were on the board years ago when we shared maintenance costs with the borough on their courts, which we don't anymore, that agreement, we take care of our courts, they take care of their courts, but it's very similar to that process. So we have that pushed out to 27, 28, and we'll keep you posted on that. Number 10, turf tank. I'm gonna punt on this one a little bit. We're still gathering information. Basically what this is a robot that will line fields. So basically you can program it and it will line fields, and we are expecting a good amount of reduction in man hours if we were to look at this. But we have some data we still got to pull together, some potential funding sources as well. So I'm going to punt on this one a little bit, but
I got a sneak peek at this out here. They did a test. First of all, it's amazing. I learned through this that a lot of colleges and high schools, this is kind of nothing new. It's what they're doing, and it's incredible the way it lines the field, how quickly and precisely to any sport that you program it for. So at the same time, we want to be honest in approaching this. We wouldn't be reducing staff, but it would allow our kind of small maintenance group, could program this, get a field line, and they could be doing other things to maintain our properties better. So they're doing some things that you can't use the robot for because they're not spending several hours just pushing a chalk line. So it isn't a reduction, but it's a better utilization of the limited man hours. It's incredible. So if we ever get it back, maybe we can time it for a board meeting and just do a really brief display out here on the lot. So
there also could be a STEM collaboration as well. Get students involved with programming it. It's very impressive. It's very impressive. I know Schuylkill Valley has one. Yeah, if the board would be interested, I can set up a demo. They'd love to come out again. So something to think about. Number 11, turf field fence replacement. Similar to the turf, the fencing down at the field hockey field takes a beating from soccer balls, footballs, lacrosse balls, field hockey balls. So we are looking to replace this as more of a maintenance for 13,432. And that's just something that Mr. Boyer and I will bring back to the board for approval Probably, that would be most likely a summer project.
How old is that fencing?
2014.
So we're gonna replace that over the, well, I know it's part of the renovation project, but the rec playground fence is older than that
It is,
by a lot.
it is. So, it's something
The
like.
fence would definitely be something we'd recommend for West Reading.
Okay,
But just, they have little different uses too. One's taking direct shots with balls at it all the time. Now, the West Reading playground probably is a little bit too.
yeah.
Because you're shooting, but these are kind of like high velocity, so they might get wear and tear might be a little different too, just because the way the projectiles, I guess, is being hurled at it, but it's a good point. They both need to be redone.
Yeah.
And so we're not saying, I think in any project we do at West Reading, the fence has to be part of it.
Okay,
You
yeah,
know, the question there is what else do we do?
right,
But the fence is certainly part of it
okay,
and needs to be done.
okay.
100%, and up until recently, the fence was on this list, but I just combined it with the playground renovation. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Thank
we've
you.
been looking at that. The next two we went over at the last facilities committee meeting, but just to give you guys a quick synopsis, this is replacing HVAC controllers at the junior high school. This is the last of the controllers district-wide. Mr. Bourne and I have been working on these for 10 years now. I would love to go in the weeds of this, and if anybody's interested and wants to go over the quote with me, I'd be happy to sit down, but I'm not going to take the time tonight. 14, transportation, bus lot, and WEC lot. So this is the piece of property, piece of asphalt really behind the Hills Elementary. It's right there next to the new steam area, so it's right kind of below it. This is going to be discussed, we're going to discuss this in detail on the 28th with Flannery Field, because this project could kind of lead into that one. Basically trying to get some of our buses and city vans off the property up here at Flannery and maybe parked over there and add additional parking in the back of WEC, because we have an underutilized piece of asphalt. But this also could go into the solar project as well. You know, we could look at a canopy over that lot and put solar panels up. You know, it's a large piece of land in the back that's pretty much underutilized. And like I said, on the 28th, we'll have pictures and I'll give you guys a better idea of what we're looking at.
That could save some money from the Flannery project in the end, depending what the board is interested in. If we don't have to create new parking on this property, you know, that's money we wouldn't have to spend, and maybe we could convert a lot and, you know, kind of kill two birds with one stone.
Absolutely. And last but not least, visitor bleachers replacement over on Bob Wolfram Field. These bleachers are over 30 years old. We are looking at, we've had a couple, our insurance consultant look at them. So at the moment, we are kind of investigating the status, and we're going to come back to you with pricing and a recommendation, but we are still in the point of kind of investigating the next steps of what we need to do with that. Okay. All right. Mr. Boyer, you want to take the next one?
So really when we talk about equipment, the field house, we always try and refresh the equipment. I mean, it just comes to the end of useful life. We just replaced some of the treadmills over there and the ellipticals. About 4 or 5 years ago, we replaced some of the free weight stands that were just very outdated and very used and needed to be replaced. Their end of life was probably years beyond what we got out of them.
And just to piggyback, they're used very heavily by our phys ed classes all day.
Yes.
And then they're used, you know, for groups that use it after school. So it's the weight room equipment used curricular and then also for extracurricular as well.
So we work closely with Mrs. Reardon. She comes up with the kind of the replacement cycle, what she's looking for, and then we just put money aside. You can see here to kind of replace that. And this is an estimate going out. She's not that far out as far as that, but just to keep it on a continual cycle, so that way we kind of have almost like a budget for it, to keep the equipment over there you know, just refreshed and still safe too. That's the big thing here. Boardroom chairs, well,
What's wrong with them?
we're actually gonna keep these chairs as a museum piece. And then bring new ones in, and if you want to keep the old one, you can have it, but if you want the new one, you can also have it.
We've had some people always lean back too
Yes.
much, you know, where they're
There's
starting to
one or
lose
two
their.
of these chairs, it
Yes.
slides forward. I don't know if anybody has that today, but
It's
you
a little
sit in it,
crooked,
you
so
sit in
like,
it and
yeah.
you like keep falling off the front of it. I
And
don't know why.
This room, when we say boardroom, it's used all the time for staff development. We can move the table, so it's a multi-purpose room. Obviously, board is part of it, but we get a lot of use. I know Dr. Woodard was just in here with a group, and so they are a convenient space to have for staff development.
So yes, we'll be looking to at least get the board a quote on the chairs, so that way we can make a decision if we want to replace them. But we are working with one of our vendors that we use for our furniture that we got for the renovation project, Cameron Furniture. We have a sample in already, but we're looking to kind of bring that to the board for replacement because I don't even know how old they are, to be honest with you. Older than 10 years old, so.
At least, yeah. Okay. All right, number 18, floor scrubber replacement. Not a fun topic to talk about, but something that's necessary for my department. We kind of have them on a cycle too. They're every 5 to 7 years. We do a good job maintaining them, so we got that pushed out about 27, 28. That one in particular is for the Hills Elementary. And it's basically just something that it's an auto scrubber that helps our custodians keep our hallways and large gathering areas as clean as possible. All right, we're gonna, do you want to talk about technology?
Sure, like Mr. Kathryn and I were very busy when we first came onto the district. So another project that's about 9 to 10 years old is our camera system. We do need to replace that, but we are going to try and do most of that through the state public safety grants that are out there. So we're going to try and avoid, which we've already started to. We've added more cameras, we added new cameras through the grant process already. So when we're going to go for the whole system replacement, we're going to try and get that through. There's 2 types of grants that are out there right now. We spoke briefly about this at Finance Committee. There's a meritorious grant that we get. I think it's $25,000. But there's a competitive grant part to that we can apply for, which we've already been awarded several times in the past. So we're going to try and go for that competitive grant and get the whole system just done at one time. And then upgrade everything and add more cameras. There's still spaces that the principals would like to see a little bit more coverage in. We want to cover all those spots district-wide. This is just not in this building. It would be district-wide. All 3 buildings, and the field house, and the fields, and Flannery Field. So we have cameras basically everywhere now. We're going to enhance that and then bring a newer system on top of it. So, but hopefully the big thing is at no cost to the district if we can get that competitive grant. And then once again, the governor's proposal, if you listen to his budget address, there's another wave of money that's going to be earmarked for public safety within the school district. So if not this year, hopefully we can finish up next year. Technology upgrades, this is specifically for our infrastructure and technology, backup, all the backup systems that we have, the battery systems that we need, that's probably that $60,000 to back up our battery systems, so that way we don't lose any type of data coverage. A lot of stuff is stored off-site. Mr. Arntz has done a great job doing the cost analysis on whether it should be cloud-based or housed in district. Some things are housed in district yet. Some things are completely cloud-based because it just made more sense to do that. We go through those exercises every single time we come up with basically a determination of what we need to do. But we do have costs coming in $60,000. We do have a quote for it. We might actually end up leasing those, doing it through a lease, which would just disperse the cost over 5 years. We're still kind of working through that information. We'll bring something to the board for their review probably next month or so. But we do want to earmark at least some money for technology upgrades because, as we know, technology changes constantly and systems just wear out. So we'll just earmark that for the next 2 years just to once again, as we're going through, some of our stuff is getting, and technology moves a little bit quickly. It's over 5 to 7 years old, which is basically useful life for most of those technology needs. Moving to vehicles. So we talked a little bit about this. The passenger vans, actually we spoke about it, I think, at our last finance committee. So we went out to bid to replace one of our passenger vans, and we spoke about it several times prior to that. We actually had the opportunity to get 2 vans. We had one, we went out for RFP, got one proposal back, and the individual said, oh, we actually have 2 vans if you'd be interested. And we're like, well, we have 3 vans. They are getting to the end of life. We had one basically not start this weekend. So we are looking to...
They made it back to the district.
Did make it back to the district, which was very fortunate. So we're going to replace those 2 vans. We're actually going to move those 2 passenger vans into our custodial / maintenance fleet, just to prolong and get some more use out of them before we have to replace those vans a little bit later, as you can see in the schedule. We would look to replace the 3rd van. We're not exactly sure yet what that would be, whether it be an actual 9-passenger school van or maybe a smaller minivan, just for our needs to see what we could use with our transportation. These vans are not in our transportation fleet, so they're not owned by Gina now. These are actually district-owned vans that do transport students. Students during the day for our special needs students. Students are going on a field trip. That's a smaller field trip, like if they're going to district orchestra, county orchestra, stuff like that. Those vans are used, and then they're used after the school day for athletics. So they are very heavily used and need to be reliable and up to date.
Mark, did we have any luck reaching out to the IU since they lost part of their transportation?
About purchasing their vans?
Yeah.
I think they actually have some plans for those vans.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we can reach out to them again.
Okay.
I would love to, once again, when we get past these 2, replace them with those 9-passenger vans.
Yeah.
If they have an extra minivan or something, probably more beneficial for us, for our fleet. It's a little bit smaller. People might feel more comfortable driving it around. And if we're only transporting 1 or 2 students, it might make sense.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, the remaining items are mostly grounds related. Number 24 is a aerator. What we can get into this, we have it pushed out pretty far, 28, 29. If the board decided to purchase this piece of equipment, it would reduce contracted services. Currently, so this is kind of right along with the turf tank. This is going to reduce contracted services, and if we got the turf tank, then we could do more in-house and potentially reduce contracted services. So this would go along the same lines, but more information to follow on that one. Number 25 is a vehicle very similar to what we have here at the high school that clears parking lots, clears sidewalks, paths, and also parking lots for snow removal. We have a piece of equipment over there, but it's aging. And this would be, it would be new, but it would also be replacing what we currently have there. So I think that's a typo there. I have to switch that in parentheses. It would be a replacement. But more information to follow on that one. Same with the next 2. Those are current pieces of equipment we have. Toro utility vehicles, very similar to like a John Deere Gator. It's getting up there in age. I believe it's a 2001. That is gonna, the hours are getting pretty high on it, and it's gonna be up for replacement soon. Same with our zero-turn mower. Once the hours get to a certain spot, we like to try to trade them in when they still have some value and get a new one and kind of keep that cycle going. But that's for a later date and more information to follow. Any questions on any of the lists, any additional details you want me to follow up on?
Just for the benefit of the other members, one of the items that came up today was the questionable status of the elevators at the junior, senior high school, and I know Mrs. Torres has a direct experience with that with her daughter. I think some of these rise to the level of like life safety immediate versus a 5-year plan that we look at other nice to haves, and just want to make sure we're sensitive to that and
Absolutely.
drilling down
Spoke,
as quickly as possible.
I basically gonna look into all the inspection reports and try to get a good idea, put a little timeline together and see how often they are breaking and see what is going on with them. And I'll bring it back to the board.
That'd be great.
No problem.
Thank you.
Do we have a lift in the event the elevator is malfunctioning?
We have emergency and vacuum tracks to go down, not to go up.
Okay.
In the event of an emergency, we have to get the individual down to do
Right.
that. Yeah.
All done, gentlemen?
Are you done, Mrs. Rhodes?
That's all I got.
Mrs. Renzo only laughs at the 1.5, 40-minute mark. Mrs. Renzo cannot pay attention anymore.
At the bottom of this, there is the breakdown financially, but when we send it out, the board can review it, and then if there's any questions, you can just reach out to me.
You kind of match to the funds that we're holding, because the whole goal of this is the majority, whatever is decided in West Reading or not decided, the same with Flannery, the goal would be to use the fund balance that we have, pay cash for these, or to say smaller projects, smaller in comparison to the, $25 million projects. So those numbers, again, are just placeholders. We're going to have a whole night on Flannery, a tour, a lot of discussion. We'll get started on some ideas for West Reading so that we could, hopefully with the board, place that into, starting this summer or somewhere thereabouts. So more, we'll bring some more back. We appreciate the feedback that you gave us tonight. Very helpful.
Thank you, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have anything for the good of the order? Thank you for hanging with us out there, Mrs. Zabinski.
Thank you. Were there handouts tonight?
There was
Besides
one
the-
about Minithon that I'm going to talk about right now, but other than that, there was a handout for the math curriculum?
It was the same as presented.
Oh, it was the same as
It's
projected.
there, but-
And-
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just two things related to scheduling. There are two things that I will always ask as board members that you would consider putting on your calendar. I think probably the most important thing for any of us to attend, and we have not had good attendance in the past, is graduation. So I don't know the date of graduation.
May 31st.
May 31st. So I really can't think of anything more important than to have some good board attendance. We get front row seats. It only warms your heart, like I could get Terrie talking about it. It's just a really important thing for us
And
to
if
be
you
at.
have a senior, that's an extra ticket. That doesn't count against your
Right, right.
family allotment of tickets.
But even for those of you who haven't had kids that age yet, it is just a really, really important thing for us to have really good board visibility out. So I would ask you to put that on your agenda. The other thing is this mini-thon that's coming up, and I've given you a flyer. Again, when you have kids who aren't in the high school yet, you haven't really experienced mini-thon. They desperately need volunteers. Minithon is a big all-night dance fundraiser for pediatric cancer modeled after Penn State main campus's event. They usually raise more than $50,000. Our high schoolers raise $50,000 or more for pediatric cancer. More importantly, it is the opportunity of the century for you to experience our school spirit, our kids, for our kids to see you. I mean, again, I'm gonna get teary, but like, when you see these custodians who have worked all week long, a full day on Friday, and then they have not gone home and taken a break and changed, and are willing to be up all night, often cleaning up all sorts of scary stuff, happily until the next morning. And teachers, same, who have kids and families who have worked all week, don't go home and stay up all night with these kids. It is unbelievable. So if you could volunteer, if you could bake some ziti, there are all these links. We got them through, it was in the Friday update for the links from Sherry. At least if you could just volunteer for 2 hours of time to be present and see this, even if it's not at 3 a.m. I get up at 3 a.m.
Community night is a lot of
It's
fun.
awesome.
Yeah, bring
We were
the
there
kids.
The
last
whole
year.
thing is awesome. So that's my pitch for that.
Bring the family.
Yeah, so that's it. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Sure.
Thank you, Dave. Second?
Second.
I didn't hear who that quiet little voice was. Was that you over there? That was Rodriguez. And all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, nay. Thank you for your time.